this is Sophie Lawson from sophielawson.com, and this is episode 5 of the So Free Art podcast, which is a little podcast I do each week about art and things. And this one's going to be another one that's more about the things. It's so cold at the moment that I'm actually recording this podcast in bed, so I'm nice and cosy. So let's get into episode 5 of the So Free Art podcast, which is all about self-doubt. It was going to be about the 1330 painting challenge, which finished yesterday, and I was going to talk about some of the things I learned and how I found painting, but I started recording it yesterday and I got hit with this really insane self-doubt, and it put me off being able to do the podcast. So then I slept on it and I thought, I'll record it again tomorrow, I'll do it again tomorrow. But then when I was at work this morning, I started thinking, why not do a podcast about the self-doubt? So this podcast is going to be all about self-doubt. I'm not sure where it's going to go, but it might be a bit chaotic, this one, because I'm just going to basically go into my head and say things. I've got some notes on paper, so I've got sort of a structure, but what I've noticed is that self-doubt is, like, so many of my ideas that I've got currently, like, they're stuck in limbo. Like, they're stuck on my whiteboard, not doing anything, because I've got so much self-doubt that I can't start them. Even like this podcast, I wanted to do a podcast years ago, but I had so much self-doubt, and it was only like a couple of months ago that I decided to ignore the self-doubt and start the podcast. But every single episode I've posted so far, I have had so much self-doubt during the recording, and it does get to a point where sometimes you think, I can't keep doing this. So, because one of the things about self-doubt with me is, because I've got like some issues with my voice, sometimes I'll say something and my voice will crack, and so I will find myself repeating the same line. So when I go onto the computer, it takes me like an hour to edit out all of the bits of my voice cracking. So there's part of me that's like, do you know what, just leave the voice cracking bits in there. But then there's this other bit that doesn't want to do that. It wants to try to minimise the cracking. I don't know if that makes sense, but what I've noticed, because this thing I've got with my throat, I'm convinced 90% of it is mental, and that if you believe that the voice is going to be nice and clear, it will be nice and clear. But what I've noticed is the minute I start putting my attention on my throat, that's when it starts cracking up. So recording a podcast like this, if I start getting a bit nervous or anxious, my voice will get worse, and so then it starts becoming this really vicious cycle where the voice gets worse, so it cracks up, so then you start expecting it to crack up, so it starts cracking up more. So that's one thing, but I think I can get over that. It's just a case of meditating on it, I think, and just getting into a positive place with the throat. But other than that, there's other things like when I started doing the painting challenge podcast, when I started doing that, I was talking about like each thing I did, like abstract painting, still lifes and stuff, and I started thinking, a voice in my head started saying, what you're saying is pointless, and all these really negative things, and I couldn't sort of stop it. And then with that, I also had the voice in my head saying, your voice isn't good enough, which was making my voice worse. And so it just got really quite bad. And it is all mental though. I can see that. So I think it's a positive in a weird way, because I think self-doubt is telling you something. And I think what it was telling me was that I'm not quite ready to do a podcast on the painting, because I think that one I need to plan it out. So I'm actually going to do that next week. And so in a weird way, there was something positive out of it. And I think this podcast might be good if nothing else, just for me to talk to myself, to sort of understand that self-doubt isn't necessarily a bad thing, and I'll describe that in a minute. But some of the things that are really causing me a lot of self-doubt at the minute are, with this podcast, I really want to, what I would really like to do is bring into the podcast things about my transgender journey. I'm not sure at the minute whether I want to do 2 podcasts or 1, and I could either do 2 podcasts, which would be this art one and another one about like transgender stuff. My head says that it's best to have 2 podcasts, but there is still part of me that wants to have 1, and I don't know if that's self-doubt or if that is just a sensible thing. So that one I'm still trying to work out. And it's the same thing with my Instagram, is like, I've got an Instagram account which has got my photos where I'm posing and also my art, and I still wonder whether I should have a dedicated art feed and a personal one, more about my transition. So even that, I'm still trying to work that one out. In terms of self-doubt, the main things at the minute are, I have this idea for a little like art course. It would be sort of run by my character Little Sophie, and it would just be a fun little art course covering the real basics of drawing and how anyone can basically start drawing. So in my head it looks really good and I really want to do that, but there's so much self-doubt saying stuff like, who are you to do a course like that? So again, I'm also battling with that one. And there's just tons of little things like that. And then in my personal life, I've got self-doubt because I've done my transition in terms of I've changed my name, I go to art class as me, but the one thing I'm struggling with is going to work, and there's a lot of self-doubt about going to work in the clothes that I want to wear. I mean, that's just a couple of examples, but I've noticed that there's self-doubt everywhere, and it's holding me back for quite a lot of things. But then what I do realise is that I think self-doubt is always going to be there when you're doing something out of your comfort zone. So this is why I think self-doubt is kind of a positive thing, because I think self-doubt means, firstly, I think it means you care, because if you didn't care about what you was doing, you wouldn't have any self-doubt, because like sometimes the self-doubt is, I'm not good enough to do this, what are people going to think of me, stuff like that. But if you didn't care about what you was doing, you wouldn't have any self-doubt. So in that way, I think self-doubt is kind of good, because it means you do care. But the main thing I think is that self-doubt means you're not playing it safe, you're actually pushing yourself to try to do things. And I've been thinking about this a lot, and I think self-doubt is coming from like a place of fear, and then the opposite of self-doubt is action, and it's the action that's coming from a place of love. So I think in a weird way self-doubt is kind of like fear versus love, which is something that I've noticed everything is about. It seems like the entire universe is about love versus fear. And because I spoke about lucid dreaming on episode 2, and I've had about another 4 or 5 lucid dreams since, and what started happening is I've started trying to overcome some of my lifelong sort of fears and anxieties and stuff, and they are starting to manifest in my dreams as quite sort of scary things. So in my dreams now, I'm having to be fearless. I'm having to face my fears, and this is actually something Robert Wagner, who is like a lucid dream expert, he did say that to be a good lucid dreamer you have to be fearless, and I'm really beginning to understand that. So in the lucid dream world, I've noticed that it seems to be love versus fear, and because what happens is some of the dream characters in the dream, they seem to be more real than real, which I spoke about before. And so say you have say you're having a dream of somebody's chasing you, right? That person who's chasing you, you could look at them as a manifestation of fear. So you can either let the fear win by running away or waking up. But if you become lucid, you can actually let love win by facing the fear, by turning around and facing the fear, and like either understanding, asking it what it wants, or just sending it a load of love. And what will happen is, so this is how it's love versus fear. What will happen is if you turn around and give the fear love, which is very scary, it's quite hard to do because you are scared. So you're having to be fearless. You're having to do something that's uncomfortable, which is exactly what self-doubt is all about. It's about taking action when you feel uncomfortable. So this is how I think lucid dreaming is kind of telling me, and I think it's telling everyone, that when you're scared, I guess in a weird way, it's okay to feel the fear. Feel the fear. I like that. It's okay to feel the fear as long as you don't let it stop you taking action. And so, like, an example is I had a dream 2 nights ago, and in this dream there was I was playing with my sister, and then suddenly she shouted suddenly she shouted out, she sells seashells on the seashore. Suddenly she shouted out. That's quite hard to say. So I was playing with my sister, and suddenly she Suddenly she shouted out. Suddenly she yelled out, dead body. She said there's a dead body. So in the dream I thought, what? And I turned around, and in the sky was this man. I think it was a man. It was just a figure on a bicycle riding around with a dead body on the front of his bike. I mean, it's very weird. And the dead body was like bits of like rotting flesh and that were coming off the bicycle. And me and my sister had been playing on this bank, like a big grassy area, and it was full of people. And when everyone saw this dead body, everyone just got up and started. I think everyone was just really scared. But the weird thing is, in the dream, I wasn't scared. I just kept saying to my sister, this means something scary is going to come, or something like that. And then I woke up, and so I wasn't that scared in the dream. It was only once I woke up that I started thinking about it. I started to get scared, and for about 10 minutes, I put the light on, and I was going to go back to bed with the light on. And then I sort of thought to myself, if I keep the light on, that kind of means I'm letting the fear win. So what I'm doing at the moment is everything that happens in my dreams, I'm trying my absolute best to sort of analyse it and have it improve my waking life. So what I did was, instead of going back to sleep, I just got up and I started writing. I actually started doing something called automatic writing, and I put links in the show notes to anything I talk about. But Michael Sandler from Inspirational.com, they've just launched an automatic writing course, and so I signed up to that. And what automatic writing is you basically get a piece of paper and a pen, and you sort of write. Say you've got something you're struggling with. Like, say for instance, you want to. What's an example? Well, I'll give the example that I had here. So the example I had is fear. I wanted to understand what fear was. So I got a piece of paper. What you do with automatic writing is you ask a question which you want an answer to, but you're struggling to work it out, and then you just let the pen almost write on its own, and you don't think about what you're writing, you just keep writing. And what happens is, it's very strange, but in a way, it's as if your subconscious starts writing through the pen. You start getting really amazing insights into whatever you're struggling with. So automatic writing is very powerful, and I've only just started doing it, but I can already see it's really powerful, and I think combined with lucid dreaming it could be very sort of healing and therapeutic. But so what I did was, instead of going back to sleep, I sat up and I wrote, "What is fear?" And I did like about 5 minutes of automatic writing, and I was able to understand. I sort of got to a place where I understood that fear is all in the mind and that there is really nothing to be afraid of. So then, once I'd done that, I turned the light off and went back to sleep. And even though I was still slightly on edge, because I didn't want to see that bloke again, because it was really scary, and I ended up lying in bed and saying to myself, I want to see that man again. Like, I want to see him, and I'm going to ask him what he's like doing here. And this is where it's quite amazing. I went back to sleep, and 1 minute before my alarm went off, this bloke showed up in my dream, and the minute he showed up I became lucid, and I knew that, because I had said to myself, if I see him again I know I'm dreaming and I want to speak to him. So in the dream I was sat on a little wooden bench, and when he showed up I jumped over the bench and ran over to him, and as I ran over to him, half of his face was like burnt, and it looked quite evil, but he had this really nice warm smile, and I wanted to hug him, but he pulled away as if to say, "You can't hug me," which was a bit weird, but he allowed me to shake his hand. And then instead of riding a bicycle, he had been pushing like a little pram. So, and I knew that he was going to give me a gift, but I was a little bit scared, because obviously I didn't know what to expect. So I turned around to this pram, and it was like an old Victorian pram, and so I'm slightly not sure if he's gonna scare me or something. And I'm doing this all consciously because I'm self-aware in the dream. I had to pull back the covers of the pram, and like there could have been anything there, like a dead body or something. But as I pulled it back, it looked like there was nothing there. And finally I saw that there was this little plastic bag. So I picked up this bag and I started unwrapping the bag. And inside the bag was a silver leaf with the sun, moon and star, a symbol of the sun, moon and star. And it was, the silver leaf was the top of a fishing hook. So it was basically a silver fishing hook with a symbol of the sun, moon and star, but there was also a little silver robin on the fishing hook, and the robin is my spirit animal. So the minute I saw that, inside of the dream, I burst into tears, because I was so emotionally happy, because I'd felt to myself, instead of being scared of this man, I went over to him, and he could have done anything. He could have scared me, but he brought me this gift with a robin, which is my spirit animal, which the robin to me means hope and just anything positive. That's what the robin symbolises to me. And so I was so happy in this dream that I woke up and I was crying in the real world. And then I did some more automatic writing about the dream. And that's when I started to realise that you have to face the fear, and if you face the fear, you're always rewarded with love, overwhelming love. So I'm going to try to use that with this self-doubt, to realise that self-doubt, I think it is just part of the process. And I think if you're going to be doing anything where you're trying to where you're facing your fears or trying to achieve something, I think you have to accept self-doubt is going to be part of it. So I've started thinking, what if you could actually spin it around and have it so that self-doubt isn't something that sabotages you, but it's actually something that you almost, this is sort of a paradox, what if you could get to a place where you actually want self-doubt? Because you could spin it and see it as a sign that you're pushing yourself. And so in a weird way, I'm going to try and see self-doubt as like a dream figure in a dream. Because Robert Wagner, he always says, go towards the energy. Which means if you're in a lucid dream, if you're aware and you're in a dream, and there's something in the dream which is, for instance, let's say it's very scary, that to him has a lot of energy. So he says always go towards the energy, even if it's scary. So I'm going to try and have self-doubt be like a dream character and say I'm going to go towards the self-doubt. And I think what could happen is if you go towards the self-doubt, instead of letting it sabotage you and stop you doing things, if you can go towards the self-doubt with love, I think it would actually help you achieve whatever you want to do. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what I'm thinking. It's kind of like a paradox, because it means you're going to end up loving self-doubt, which doesn't seem right, because in a weird way you don't want self-doubt, but I'm going to try and spin it so that I do want self-doubt. And the good thing about that is it would mean if you could get to a place where you actually enjoy self-doubt, you would end up doing loads of more things which have self-doubt, and self-doubt is always with the things that are going to make you a better person or a better artist or whatever. So in a weird way, if you can I think this is going to be quite funny, because you're going to end up having a life full of self-doubt but enjoying the self-doubt, because you're going to end up getting the rewards of feeling the love from facing the fear of the self-doubt, if that makes sense. And something with the painting challenge is it did show me that this is all mental, because before I started the challenge, I had a lot of fear about painting because I've never really done it before. And I also, one of the little goals that I put into the challenge wasn't just painting every day. It was also putting my paintings onto Facebook and Twitter and stuff, and onto the website. So it was like I had to publicly put my paintings out there, even when I knew they were not going to be that good, because I've only just started, so I don't really know what I'm doing. Because I'm a bit of a perfectionist. When you're doing a challenge like this and putting out work every single day, it means you're putting out imperfect work. What's really good about putting out imperfect work is you realise that it doesn't matter. Nobody actually cares if what you put out isn't very good. And when you realise that nobody else cares, it means you don't care. But it doesn't mean you start putting out rubbish work. It just means you don't sit there for 5 hours trying to make something perfect when it's good enough. I guess that's it. You end up realising that you can just put stuff out that is good enough. And you don't even need to put it out, but I guess putting it out there is a good way to prove to yourself that it doesn't matter. And this podcast actually started because of that, because last year I did a 75-day digital painting challenge, and that one again I said I have to put something out every day. And so some of the things I put out in that challenge were not very good, to be honest, but when I realised that it was okay to put out imperfect work, I then thought, well, why not start the podcast? Because if I hadn't have done that painting challenge, I would have never put the podcast out, because I would have kept holding on until I think I could have made the podcast perfect. But I feel like that would never happen, so it would never exist. And again, like I said at the very beginning, something else I've noticed is if you put something out that's good enough, and you keep putting something out that's good enough, in the end, that good enough will be a lot better than what the perfect would have been at the start, if that makes sense. So in a weird way, by putting things out that's good enough, you do sort of end up putting out things that are perfect. I like that. I think that's quite good. So I guess the main thing I'm learning at the moment is I'm just becoming aware of self-doubt and trying to work out what it is. I'm trying to make friends with the self-doubt, and I'm also getting into the habit of putting out things which aren't perfect. And I think this is going to help me with my YouTube channel, because I haven't put any videos on YouTube for about a couple of years, and it wasn't just because of my transitioning. It was also because I thought the videos won't be good enough, so I'm going to end up being able to do my YouTube videos now as well, and I'll make them good enough. And in the end they should be a lot better. So if there was anything to take away from this episode, I think it would be that self-doubt is fear, and the way to deal with self-doubt is to give it love, which is action. So it's a case of taking action even when you have the self-doubt, and by doing that, the self-doubt will turn into love, and then everyone's happy. I hope it makes sense. I'm going to keep thinking about this, and I'll probably do some automatic writing about self-doubt, because what I do at the moment is I do about 30 minutes of automatic writing every morning, and I think what I might do tomorrow morning is do some automatic writing on self-doubt, and I'll see what comes up with that. But I hope you enjoyed this podcast, and you can find show notes and stuff on the website at sofreeart.com, and I'll put a link in there to the Inspirational Show automatic writing course. I think it worked out at about £30, and that's for lifetime access. They have a 30-day challenge. They have there's tons of videos breaking everything down into simple steps. They include meditations, binaural beats, which helps you focus, and you also get access to the private Facebook group, which I'm in there as well, so we could all say hello. And they also have a live call-in where you can actually ask questions, and Michael and Jessica will answer your questions. So I think for £30 it's absolutely amazing, and I've been doing it for about 7 days so far, and like I said, I've already had some amazing insights, and it's incredibly powerful. And I think if you could bring it into your daily routine, like the first thing you do when you wake up is that, I think you would really improve your life. So I would definitely recommend having a look at that. And I'll try to link to Robert Wagner's website, because I've been consuming his videos lately, and he's the lucid dreaming expert, and I've just purchased his book, which is Lucid Dreaming: Gateway to the Inner Self. One of my absolute dreams, I'm gonna tell you a secret now. One of my absolute dreams would be, in the future, to believe in myself enough to actually interview Robert Wagner on this podcast, because I would love to ask him about lucid dreaming, and ask him, because he talks quite a lot sometimes about creativity and dreams, and I think I would love to talk to him about creativity, like how artists use lucid dreaming to help them, but also things like to help with gender issues and stuff like that. So that's a dream. At the minute I definitely couldn't be interviewing somebody, but the fact that it's in my head now, I'm going to have to find a way to become brave enough to ask him if he would do that. And he seems like a really nice person who's he's appeared on so many podcasts, and he always gives everything he has, and he seems like a really nice person. So I think he would say yes if I asked. But I'll have to wait and see on that one. So I'll give a link to his website, and anything else I think about I'll put in the show notes. But you can find me at sophielawson.com. You find me on Twitter at sophielawsonart and on Instagram at sophie.lawson. And I think that is it. I hope you enjoyed this show. This week's quote, I've wrote it down on a piece of paper, and it is from Jameson Frank. And the quote is, "Our greatest battles are those with our own minds." Jameson Frank. Deep breath and begin. Hello, this is... No.